Okay. So beginning of the parsha. I want to see a bit about the Kohanim and then later on about the Yom Tovim as well, which is obviously the second half of the parsha. So Rashi says, Emor V'amarta, this question of the beginning, the question of why it is that we say, I don't find the regular chorus. I haven't got regular chorus. Sorry. Thank you. Rashi says that the whole instruction of Emor V'amarta, the double lashon, is in order to tell the adults to tell the children how to behave. Sorry, thank you so much. Lashon mashim b'divrei saying of hazar zos lomar, and this warning, particularly according to Rashi, is shalom nesayeh b'tumah saktanim b'yodayim, not to assist the impurity of children directly. In other words, Toras Rabbos B'Torah. So you find this many places in the Torah. If you mention Rabbeinu, you find it with dam, with blood, b'shrotzim, with what's it called, with creepy crawlies, and the creatures that swarm, etc. But tumah. We must never assist children in transgression, right? This is very important. This is what it says in the Torah. They do it themselves. We're not obligated in order to stop them doing it. Obviously, there's all sorts of halachas about that. It's talking about beis din are not required to do so. Okay, different things I think with mitzvah chinuch. We're not going into that now. So, in other words, the idea is of the double lashon, according to Rashi, is to ensure that they shall not become tomei, and they shall also make sure the children as well, that everyone has to be careful about this. That's the first explanation. That's Rashi. Ibn Ezra says, but I'll skip a few lines. Emor Rabbi Avram, b'derech hapshat, in the straightforward explanation, he says, Emor al HaKohanim, haparsha niskeres lemalo. The problem you see that all the Mefarshim are dealing with here is what is the Emor, right? It's a basic problem, right? What is Emor? You know, Emor al HaKohanim b'nei Aram, v'omar ta'aleim, and you shall say to them. You already said, it seems to be double saying and say to them, right? So according to the Ibn Ezra, the Emor al HaKohanim is the previous parsha. Now, what is the previous parsha got to do with the Torah? Got to do with this one? Why here? Why is it? What has it got to do with? You have to specifically instruct the Kohanim. Last week's parsha is not specifically about the Kohanim; it's about all of Klal Yisrael. And the answer is because the Kohanim have another role. They are supposed to be the teachers of Torah. They are the people who tell everyone what to do. We shall say to them, these are the mitzvahs that they are obligated themselves, not the ones they're responsible for others for. So Ibn Ezra says the Emor goes back on the previous parsha. The Kohanim are responsible for making sure that they do the right thing, right? That the Bnei Yisrael act correctly. V'amar tzolahem is this parsha. Ramban says he disputes this. He doesn't agree. Thinks it's not correct. According to the Ramban himself, he says, I believe the explanation of the pasuk is as follows: Tam Emor k'moy daber. We find many other cases where you find this explanation used in terms of the word to speak. Imri hazina Hashem dabri k'men imri emes v'chen ki shamas kol imri Hashem. He brings the various psukim. Bo'el parav v'dabar toilov k'men v'omarto v'dabar mishoda. It says that we go through all the psukim he brings. Brings a whole list of psukim where you find the same thing, this double phrase, speak and speak. And he said the reason for this phrase, you find it in the Torah, whenever there is a specific reason to instruct them, to warn, but in a particularly forceful manner, right? And there can be two reasons for this, says the Ramban. Either because it's a very strict issue, a very severe issue.
Just say daber. Even if you're stressing, just say daber.
You mean daber as being itself a stronger phrase? Yeah, but I think he's saying that there's an even stronger way of doing it, which is by using a double phrase. So one of the psukim he brings is daber al b'nei Yisrael v'omar to'aleim. There you have a daber. So you're right, daber is more intensive. No, here it doesn't. Yeah, here it doesn't. Here it doesn't. And yeah.
With respect to Ramban, it's far more logical.
Because
it makes sense. Like, Emor Rabbi Yoni, comma Benah Harod, comma goes before. But
you still need the double. You still need the double. The double still makes it stronger. He's saying it's the emphasis of the double phrase, the double speech,
and it's still
not the daber alone. Not the daber. Yeah. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but the other way, the point is that it's he's emphasizing the fact that it's double. He's not specific, I think, emphasizing the fact that it's emor rather than daber. Yeah. And he says there are two reasons for it. Either because the topic itself is very serious and requires this double phrase, right? And they bring here in the notes here on the Ramban, that's why you find the same thing with the korbanos, because they are so severe, they're so important, etc., etc. So it's doubled in this in these contexts, and there's other examples of this as well. So that's one possible reason. Or that they are matters where there is a tendency to sin with them. And therefore, there's a need to be very cautious and tell them very explicitly, you have to be extremely careful with them. And he brings here in the notes from Toras Moshe says that with the Kohanim, right, one of their key roles is they're supposed to be set an example, right? Now, if you set an example, what does that mean? It means you're also very good with being Adam Lachaveri, you're good with how you treat others. They're supposed to be tzaddikim. They're supposed to be gomli chasodim, people who treat others well, and they're nice and they're kind to people. Okay, and that's why he says that this double phrase comes to warn them to keep these halachas, because for the Kohanim particularly, these were really difficult to keep, some of them. You know, if you're a person who naturally wants to do the right thing, and the Kohanim again are meant to set an example, right? So what do you want to do when it comes to a situation of a kvura? Of course, they want to involve themselves in the mitzvah of bearing the mace, right? Potentially, if the person isn't it, well, there's a deceased person, there's a mace there, yeah. And similarly, one of the things they're told to do is not to tear and not to cut themselves over a mace, right? Let's just treat our mace. So again, why? Okay, the minister also told us to do that. But again, because that's a natural thing that might come to them. They're people who have feelings, they have emotion, they're kind, etc., etc. So all these things have to be told. No, Torah tells you can't become Tomei, and you've got to live with a responsibility. Okay, and so that's why they have to be told not to become Tomei, and that's why it needs a very strict lashon. Okay, and he brings again other psukim where you find a similar thing. Okay. Yeah, we just skip a few lines. Okay. Right now, just skip to where it says V'tam HaKohanim. Can you see where it says V'tam HaKohanim? So that's the Ramban's pshat. The Ramban's pshat is Rashi learns because you've got to tell the children. Ibn Ezra learns because you have to. It refers to the previous parsha. The previous parsha is Emor, and V'omarta is this week's parsha. The Ramban says no. The double phrase is because it is necessary to emphasize it, particularly either because these are very strict, severe issues, or because they are things which they are normal to. They're accustomed to. It's common for them to sin in.
Emor is present. Marta is future.
Yeah, that's all. Well, that would maybe supports Ibn Ezra a little bit. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. In the previous. Yeah. Why is it a Kohanim? V'tam HaKohanim. Okay, his question here is a very interesting one, right? Often it says, many times in the Torah it says, to speak to Aaron el-Bonov. Here, Emor HaKohanim. Why the Kohanim? Right? Why the Kohanim? He's going to explain because there are two aspects to the kedusha that goes to a kohen. The V'tam HaKohanim kim mitzvahs Hashem ben Yoni hakorbanos yomel Aaron ve'el-Bonov v'lo yizkirim b'shem HaKohanim. Whenever you find all the instructions that are given about the korbanos, you will see, and you look carefully, it talks Aaron Ubonov. Aaron Ubonov, you could say, is the same as the Kohanim, right? Who is Aaron Ubonov? The Kohanim, right? Aaron and his children are the Kohanim, right? But there's a difference. With the korbanos, it says Aaron Ubonov. It doesn't call them Kohanim. Ki ha'inyonim oheim b'korbanos obemalos hakodesh. Those things are about korbanos or spiritual heights, etc., of holiness. Here they're telling you, they can never become Tomei with a mace, even if it's nothing to do with the mikdash. It's not in the Beis HaMikdash and it's not korbanos. It's nothing to do with those issues, right? There is an instruction, a separate instruction, not to become Tomei. That is a specific level, spiritual level they have in and of themselves. And that's why it says the Kohanim. Because they are Kohanim to Hashem, and they serve our God, they serve Hashem. It says to them, they should act with honor, and greatness with themselves. They should never become Tomei, right? They should never become Tomei. Right? The Chalolim are excluded from this. The Chalolim are excluded. Someone who's a Chalol is excluded from this halacha. So now, so basically the point is, as they explain again in the notes here, which are very helpful, from a sefer called Kli Chemda, explains the point is like this. Ramban is trying to tell us here that really there are two kedushas that apply to Kohanim. There are two separate concepts of holiness that apply to the Kohanim, right? One is the sanctity, their level of kedusha, which comes from the fact that they are descended from Aaron. That's one aspect of kedusha. They're Aaron's children, okay? The second one is that they themselves are Kohanim, right? They have an intrinsic kedusha because they are a Kohen, right? And how that plays out in two different, it means that different things apply to these. There are different halachas of the Kohanim that stem from each of these two aspects of their status, right? So, Tuma for the Kohanim, yeah, I think she's gone away. Yeah, Tuma for the Kohanim is not because they are B'nai Aaron. The fact they're not allowed to become Tomei, yes, does not come from their status as B'nai Aaron. Okay, what's the proof? Okay, because the Chalolim, that means someone who's become Nischalel from the Kohana, right? Someone's become Nischalolim from the Kohana, they're allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. They're allowed to serve in the Cholo is allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, but they are allowed to become Tomei. Okay, they're allowed to become Tomei. They're allowed to become Tomei because they are the Isur Tumah. The Isur Tumah, the fact that they can't become Tomei, that comes from the fact that they are Kohanim, in and of themselves. Okay, the status of these rules, like not at least halachas, you can't become Tomei, does not come from the fact that they are B'nai Aaron. It comes from the fact they're Kohanim, right? Okay, it is a special thing that is Kedushas Kohana. Okay, and the opposite applies to a Baal Mum. Someone who has a blemish, right, is not allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash, right? Because but he's got Kedushas Kohana. He's got Kedushas Kohana, right? He's allowed to eat Kodesh Kodeshim, the most holy things, and he's not allowed to be Tamei Lamesim, right? Whereas a Cholol, even though a Cholol again can serve in the Beis Hamikdash, okay, we learn from Pasuk Baruch Hashem Cheloi, even if there's a Cholol, he can still serve in the Beis Hamikdash, but nevertheless, he's allowed to become Tomei Lameis. Allowed to become Tomei Lameis, right? Because Tumas Meis, the restriction on becoming Tomei, okay, applies to Kohanim when they're in their status as Kohanim, right? That's what's going on here. Whereas there are other things that apply to a Kohen, not because he is himself a Kohen, but because he's a descendant from Aaron. And by descending from Aaron, that gives them a certain status. And that status is, for example, the fact is from the fact that they are to be served in the Beis Hamikdash, for example. That's what comes from the Bnei Aaron, the associated things that comes from that.
So what comes from his own personal status?
His own person as being a Kohen, the halachas that occur in this parsha, right? So, for example, not being allowed to become.
To do with the past.
It doesn't come from the status of descending from Aaron. Descending from Aaron gives you the right to serve in the Beis Hamikdash and all the things associated with the korbanos, for example, etc., right? I'm trying to work out if it's kind of a positive and negative. I'm not sure though. What you can do and what they're restricted from doing. I don't know if it's as simple as that. But when it comes to the status of Kohuna, that gives the person, regardless of the fact they may or may not. Of course, they are also descended from Aaron. That's the other aspect to it. Mm-hmm. But the Tumah, the restriction, the Isur Tumah, that applies to them in their status as Kohanim, their intrinsic kedusha. And therefore, the example of where a person can still be a ben Aaron, but not have that kedusha, he says, is a cholol. So a cholol, someone who's become disqualified from being a kohen, for example, the son of someone who comes from a kohen as a grusha, etc., the children are chalolim. Okay, so he can't. So he's allowed to become Tomei Lameis. He doesn't have that status of kedusha, right? That's what he says. However, they're also allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. There's a paradox there, and you see that it comes from two different things. Again, it's probably all halachas associated with this, but that's the basic idea the Ramban is saying. That's what he says. Berich Hashem Chelo. That's what you learn from Berich Hashem Chelo. Even that's what he says. I don't know exactly about what the halachas that apply to this. Yeah.
So would a cholol be able to Tomei?
He's saying that a cholol can. That's what he's saying. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Yeah. But again, yeah. So he's saying they can't become okay. Anyway, the Ramban then goes on to say how they. Pardon? No, I don't think so. Eat from the korbanos. A Baal Mum can eat from the korbanos. I don't know. No. A cholol can't.
What are they doing in the Beis Hamikdash?
He's allowed to do the avodah. That's what he says. But not allowed to eat the korbanos, I think, because he doesn't have kedushas kohuna. That's why he's allowed to come Tomei Lameis. Now, I just want to show you a few more. If you skip a few more lines, what does it mean Baal Ba'amov? Because it says lo yitamov Baal Ba'amov, right? Okay. Okay. Now. Okay. So again, he brings. One second. The next, these words, the Pasuk Dalet says, which we translate normally as a husband among the people. His people not should not contaminate himself, the one who desecrates him. So this is learned from the halachas, I think, of the it's talking about kohuna, where he's entered into an Issa. Rashi explains what this pasuk is talking about. If he marries a woman who's posel, disqualified to him, right? So he'll become a chulul through her, he'll become disqualified through her, etc., right? Okay, but the Targum Onkelos says on this pasuk, which the Ramban brings, lo yistoav rabov amei la'achalusei, that someone who's important in the people should not become tomei to profane himself. And the Ramban understands that the word that again, just skip a few lines, just the key point I want to bring out of this. People who have an honored position are called masters, adonim, right? So one who is honored amongst his people shall not become tomei lahocheles kavodo, to profane his honor. Because the lofty status of the Kohen, because he is someone who should be a godol and honored amongst his people, do not desecrate your status through becoming Tomei to Mason, right? And the point, therefore, is, it would seem, that to bring this all together, what the Ramban is telling us here with the concept of Kohanim and Bnei Aaron, is that in order to fulfill these psukim, and to rise above the challenges that occur in order to keep them, it is not enough for a Kohen to think, I am descended from Aaron a Kohen. He has to be a Rabbo Ba'amei, right? He has to believe in his own greatness. Rabbo means a great person. They explain in the notes here that the significance of Onkelos is that normally the Targum of Baal is Baal. It's the same thing in Hebrew and Aramaic, right? Yeah, Baal, we translate as a husband or whatever, right? Here he specifically says that Baal, it means Rabbo, someone who's great, because that's the responsibility of the Kohen. The responsibility of the Kohen is to realize that he has a great status in and of himself, and it is that, okay, that allows him to achieve this status, right? And that's how it is. Okay. So okay, so this is the explanation of how it works in terms of the Kohanim, and it really opens up the whole rest of the parasha, I think. In other words, understanding that is the role of the Kohanim, according to the Ramban, the role of the Kohanim is to see themselves not just as Bnei Aaron, but also Kohanim. And it's not easy because they have responsibility. It means restrictions on them. It's very, very difficult. You have to explain this sometimes to chalolim. I've met a number of chalolim in my role in the Beis Din. That's what we do, right? You meet chalolim and you explain to them, look, unfortunately, it's not of your own fault, but there are restrictions on you. Yeah. Sometimes it can work the other way around. I've met recently a chalola, and she's marrying a Ben Levi. She's mutter. A chalola. She's a chalola because she was descended from a man who married a grusha, a kohen who married a grusha. But the Gemara says in Kiddushin, B'nai Yisrael, a mikveh tara lachalolim, which means that her children are now allowed again to marry a kohen because they go after the father, the husband, which is not the case if he's a cholol. If he's a cholol, children also chalolim. But B'nai Yisrael, mikveh tara lachalolim. A non-kohen is basically a mikveh for a chalolah, in the sense that her children are now kosher to marry a kohen, which I explained all this. Non-plus, but I explained, okay, but it's okay, your children can marry a kohen. And luckily you're not marrying a kohen, I said. And she said, oh yeah, it's lucky. So this is... Yeah.
Patriarchally, none of their cholol right the way through.
Yes. If you're a cholol, your son's a cholol.
Yeah, grandson, great grandson.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, of course. They're all nischalel from the kuna. They can never regain their kuna status.
We have the record. How do we know?
We have to. Yeah, we were.
Don't talk about the best in today.
Yeah,
300 years ago, 400.
No, that's a good question, and that's a good question, and debated, and a fascinating debate about. Normally, the debate comes up the other way around. That means to say someone has a question of their kuna status, and they want to get out of the kuna status in order to marry someone they're not allowed to marry. And it's very dodgy to do that, but they want to try and argue or prove, so to speak, that they're not really kohanim because they were nischalel somewhere.
Also, when they lost duchen.
No, but I'm saying, but it's very.
Say if they duchen, that means they thought they were gone.
Yeah, okay, exactly. It's very difficult to do that. But anyway, it's a bigger topic.
Self-regulation.
Not for today. Not for today. It's a fascinating maybe topic for another first year.
This is duchening was something that happened in the Beis Hamikdash.
Yes.
And you said that Chol be in the Beis Hamikdash to serve.
That's what he says.
They could not follow the whole presentation.
No, and I don't know. Again, this is what the Ramban says, and based on the notes, there wasn't something you have to look into it in more detail in terms of how that works, etc., etc. Yeah, no, but today they can't. It's a knas, you see. It's a thing. Okay, let's just very, very briefly, a few minutes. If you skip to Perek Chof Gimel Posuk Base, just on how the Ramban explains. It's just the beginning.
Cholol's son cannot marry.
No, he can.
Sorry, Cholol's son cannot marry.
Can marry Cholol can marry anyone. He's got restrictions on a kohen. A Chalolah cannot marry a kohen.
Yeah, so
it's very confusing. She's hostile for marrying a kohen, but her children are okay.
And the Cholol himself suffers the children of the Cholol suffer no indignity whatsoever.
They do. His sons are Chalolim too. Yes. But they can marry anyone because a man who's a Cholol can marry anyone. Pardon? What can they not do? Yeah. They don't get any Kedushas Kuna.
Yeah, okay. So when they get pulled up to the shop.
Yeah, sure, of course. They don't get any power to any schusim as a kohen.
He's no worse than me.
Okay.
Right, part of the proletariat.
Yeah, in a way, you could look at it like that. Yeah, in a way. Okay. He says the kohenim have no involvement in Yomim Tovim more than Yisrael. That's why he doesn't warn in this parsha Aaron Abonov. The Moedim apply to everyone, right? Everyone, not just the Kohen. Again, this Ramban is just beautiful for the way he explains Pshat. This, he says here, you don't find in this parsha the Musafim. They're not detailed. Right? The Yirmez Aleim. It says that here. Why does it mention Yom Tovim at all? Let's start from there in Sefer Vayikra. Right? Why? The answer is because they are days of korbanos, and it hints to the korbanos in this parsha. It says obviously the korbanos are hinted at throughout the parsha of the Yom Tovim here. It mentions the korbanos at the end of the parsha. But it doesn't go into length to explain the Musafim because the Musafim did not apply in the Midbar, and that's why it's all set up very carefully. It's all fair with the way the Ramban is explaining everything is perfectly in the right place. Okay, the Musafim are in Pinchas. The Musafim are not in Vayikra, right? And even in Vayikra, there's not great emphasis on the korbanos. They belong in Vayikra because they are days when many korbanos are brought and special korbanos, and therefore that's why the description of the Yom Tovim belongs here. But you see, the Musafim are not mentioned, and the reason is because the Musafim only applied. Those korbanos only applied once they left the midbar. And in Parshas Pinchas, after it says, you shall divide up the land to these individuals, these people, and how it works in Parshas Pinchas. That's why the Musafim belong there at the end of Pinchas. So it's explained here in just a few lines, so many different things. Why the Yom Tovim splits up? Why did they half in Vayikra and half in Pinchas? It's all exactly there. Beer, then Musafim Kulam Parshas Pinchas, Shiasu Sambaretz, Miyadul Adoris. They should do them immediately when they enter Eretz Yisrael and for future generations. Okay? You understand? That's why you have this split here. Here in Vayikra, you have the Moedim, which belong here because there are lots of special korbanos that are brought there, and therefore it belongs in Toras Kohanim. However, the Musafim only apply when they enter Eretz Yisrael, therefore it's only given to them once they are told how to divide up the land. And that's why it says, if you look in Parshas Acharei, he says, why is it that on Yom Kippur it says, he did as Hashem commanded. She also came by Midbar, because the Korbanos Yom Kippur they did do in the Midbar, unlike the Musafim, which are only done when they entered Eretz Yisrael. Why does he mention the Korbanos of the Omer and Shvuas? It's got a question now. We know that these korbanos, the korbanos of Shavuos and the korbanos of the Omer, were obviously only applicable once they entered Eretz Yisrael. They come glal halechem because of the lechem is the most in the menachos. When you bring these korbanos, they come. You have the lechem and the special shtei lechem. That's why you bring the korbanos as well, right? And the Omer, etc., right? So why is it that you have to bring these are mentioned in this week's parsha? The answer is he seems to say. Because since the days themselves apply immediately, so the days of the Omer and the days of Shavuos, so that's why they are mentioned here as well. Shabbos, and it mentions Shabbos Moed Hashem Shetikros Mikro Kodesh Shigam Hu Yom Moed Nikros Mikro Kodesh. It's also called a Mikro Kodesh because it's a day, a designated day, a holy convocation. But if you look carefully at the Psukim, he says, you will see that the other Yom Tovim are separated from Shabbos. That these are the Yom Tovim which you shall proclaim in the right time. This is all through the Mekadesh the Chodesh. Kiddush HaChodesh tells you that designates which day. When Rosh Chodesh is, tells you when Yom Tov will be. Shabbos Kavuah, because Shabbos is fixed. You don't need to call it in its right time. And then he brings Chazal. The Chazal say this is a remez Moadom to the Ibra Hashana, the creation of leap years, the responsibility we have to leap a year if necessary. Right? Okay. So that's how that's how it is. Okay, fine. So anyway, I think that there's more that he goes into here, but I think just in a few lines, again, it's a beautiful example of the way the Ramban is able to the Ramban is able to just spell out so clearly and so succinctly Pshat, why this parsha is here, why it's not in Pinchas, why something's in Pinchas and not here, right? And this is all explained so beautifully. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's just do one more very quickly. Go back one. Just Lamed base. It's just a few lines on the mitzvah of V'niktashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael, which is just before the Ramban. Before this, the last posuk in the Ramban before this one. The Tam V'niktashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. Why does it say? What does it mean? Because he says, Chazal say, this is a positive mitzvah. We should sanctify Hashem's name by mitzvahs, to be, if necessary, those mitzvahs one has to give up one's life for. And that's why it says that, he says like this, what does it say in the Pasuk? Hamutzi eschem was taking you out from Eretz Mitzrayim, lios lochem le'elokim, to be a God for you. Shutam, Yichlor kol mitzvahs shiroi lekadish mo'aleim, ba'avur shanachnu avoda b'shegolanu Mitzrayim. In other words, how can a person do this? That's really the question. How is it possible for a person to achieve that level of v'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. A person should give their life for mitzvahs, and the answer is that there are mitzvahs that we have to mekadesh Shema HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is on account of the fact that we are His servants. Asher galonim b'Mitzrayim. Like this, the only way a person could ever achieve the level, I think that's what the deeper explanation of what he means, of being able to perform the ultimate sacrifice of be mekadesh Hashem Shomayim, Ihorek v'al Yavar, to give up one's life for mitzvahs, it was necessary in circumstances that it's necessary, or mitzvahs that it's necessary for, must be only because Asher galonim b'Mitzrayim. The root of everything is Mitzrayim. The root of everything is Yitzias Mitzrayim. When we understand that everything we have is dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim and created our lives in this way, that leads a person to be able to themselves be able to self-sacrifice. And of course, I think there's a lot in there. Again, we don't have time to go into it. There's much in there in our entire attitude towards mitzvahs. The extreme example is Anachnu Avodov, and therefore, because we are Avodim, we're an Eved Hashem, the person has the potential ability to perform the ultimate sacrifice. But beyond that as well, it includes everything, right? That a person, he doesn't understand, as the Rosh famously says, Chaim Rosh, right? Mishin Imamin, as a Rosh in Chaim Rosh, he says that after me, very famous words. The Rosh says the person doesn't believe in Sharish Tzichem Eretz Mitzrayim. If you don't believe the took us out of Egypt, you don't believe in Hashem. It doesn't. It all starts from that. It starts from that whole connection is built from Yitzias Mitzrayim, and without that, a person has no possible kiyum and ability to fulfill belief itself, if you like. So again, we did just a little bit, but we've done something. Okay. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, bye, Danny. See you soon.